Good evening and Yali Madad, everyone. It's an absolute pleasure to welcome you to tonight's event. I hope you enjoyed the gut-friendly food and are now ready to relax, digest, and absorb an evening full of insight and inspiration. I'm Dr. Rabia, and I'm board member of the Aga Khan Health Board, a volunteer organisation which works to enhance the physical and mental well-being of the over 30,000 Ismailis across the UK. By profession, I'm a neurogastroenterologist. Yes, it's a mouthful, and no, I didn't invent it to sound smarter than the average Ismaili doctor. I study how the brain and gut talk to one another. It's a unique conversation which I hope to unpack for you in tonight's event. I am so grateful that there are over 200 of you here in person. A very warm welcome to you all. We are here tonight to explore something that affects us all, well-being and lifestyle. When people ask me what well-being really means, I turn the question back. What does feeling well look like to you? In the NHS, we're great at treating illness, but not so great at preventing it. And that's where the idea of well-being comes from. It's about helping you live healthier and happier lives before things go wrong in your body, or helping you bounce back from ill health with a non-medicalized approach. As Ismailis, we place great emphasis on quality of life, balancing the spiritual and the material, the din and the dunya. Islam teaches us that having a healthy body supports not just our physical strength, but our capacity to use our intellect and deepen our spiritual practice. And where better to start this journey than with the gut? This 9-meter long piece of plumbing does far more than digest your food. It processes your thoughts, your feelings, and your behaviors. Have you ever had butterflies before stepping outside of your comfort zone, or felt nauseous after hearing bad news, or found something that someone else said hard to swallow? That's your gut brain talking. With more nerves, immune cells, and microbes than any other solid organ, it's one of the most complex and powerful systems of the body. But before we dive deeper, and I give too much away, allow me to introduce our expert speakers for this evening. These 3 women here on stage are changing the way that we talk about guts. Lisa and Alana MacFarlane, some may say they look a bit similar, went from DJing at the Olympics to presenting on the Brits red carpet and BBC One Extra. But their boldest move? The gut stuff. A pink, loud, fearless business tackling the poo taboo across the nation. With 3 books, a gut health app, and a global Channel 4 show under their belt, they are still among the most grounded and humble people I have the pleasure to call my friends. Sophie Medlin is a consultant colorectal dietitian with nearly 20 years of experience across the NHS, academia, and private practice. Sophie is unique. She specialises in managing complex bowel conditions, but she brings evidence-based nutrition to the public in a way that is clear, concise, and refreshingly real. Lastly, a quick rundown of the evening. Our time is split into thirds. Lisa and Alana will now take to the stage with a short presentation, followed by a fireside chat between the 4 of us, answering your pre-event questions. And now, without further ado, please put a warm welcome, your hands together for the fabulous Lisa and Alana MacFarlane.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for having us. I want to just preface this by
saying that we were far less eloquent than Rabia.
Yeah, that.
So brace yourself.
We get very excited and very Scottish. So if we
It'll
do
be fine for the people in Glasgow and Edinburgh.
Yes,
they'll understand.
Please put your hands up if we are too fast and excited.
So we've got 15 minutes, so we're going to do a whistle-stop tour around the science of gut health, what it means for you, and some tips at the end. So, a bit about us. We will whiz round this, but the way we got into gut health was extremely random. About 10 years ago, Lisa and I volunteered for Tim Spector at King's College, and we were the sort of chief guinea pigs there. And to cut a long story short, they found out from our bodies, even though we have 100% the same DNA as identical twins, we actually only had 30 to 40% the same gut microbiome, which was groundbreaking for us, but also groundbreaking for medical research. And it really got us on a journey of becoming so passionate about what gut health was and really starting to democratise it. I think when we got into gut health 10 years ago, the conversations were happening in the back of Planet Organic or in The Guardian, and we thought we need to get the people information to the people that need it most. So we started doing sort of talks, whoever would have us 10 years ago. It's amazing to see 200 people in this room, but when we started doing it nearly a decade ago, we would turn up and there'd be 2 people there that had stumbled on it by mistake. So we started doing road shows. We took them around the UK. We also do workplace wellness, which we now have 300 clients, everyone from Accenture, Deloitte, Meta. So that's brilliant for us from an education point of view. And for every talk we do in a corporate environment, we give back to a school, university, or street corner, whoever will have us. We're also piloting to be on the school curriculum, and we're on the NHS Food Review Board too. We have a selection of products. So we have high fibre bars that you will get on your way out. They're available in Tesco, Sainsbury's, Boots, most places now. And we've just launched our drinks and our app, and we'll have the code for the app as we go on. Sorry, that's normally a bit longer, but I'm whizzing through because nobody cares about us. They care about their own gut. What we've done, I guess, and the thing that was most important to us was finding out exactly, how many people could we get to with this information. We became so passionate about everything the gut was linked to, and we wanted everyone to know about it. So we have had the TV show that Rabia and Sophie were absolutely amazing on and the stars of. We've just launched a podcast, and we didn't think our life would have the headline as Plop Stars, but
we are where we are. Also, in terms of the TV show, this is one of the first times the 4 of us have been back together, and 10% of the UK population saw that show. There was over 7 million people that watched it, so it really is incredible. But the serious part of that is that the world has got a problem. There's more NHS admissions for diseases of digestive health than anything else. There's over 70 diseases, which we'll come on to a little bit today, that are linked to imbalances in gut health. And 10% of GPs' time is spent on digestive issues, a lot of which I'm sure could be prevented with knowing at least 10% of probably what we're going to talk about tonight. And there's a 52% increase in bowel cancer in UK adults younger than we think, so 25 to 49. So this information is not only timely, but it's crucial. And obviously with nearly over 40% of the population suffering with a digestive issue or symptom, that's huge, almost half the population. Both it's linked to heart, skin, immunity, mental health, everything. It's important that we all start to look after our guts. Okay, so whistle-stop tour of what is the gut. There's a lot of reasons why gut health is complicated, but one of them is because we're actually talking about 2 different things. We're talking about the physiological workings of our gut, and then we're talking about the microbial, which we'll get on with. But actually, I think the biggest confusion, and it certainly was for us when we first got into gut health, that it wasn't just our stomachs. It's actually everything from mouth to bottom, and as Rabia touched on, it is a huge piece of kit. So I think that, for me, was a massive light bulb moment in realising, exactly how important my gut was and how many different organs were involved in it. What does your gut do? Do you want to take this one? Yes, sure. So I think, we all sort of know that our gut is in charge of the digestion and absorption of food. We all are familiar with that concept. But what we might not know is that it's also really closely linked to our immune system. Our gut bacteria, which we'll get onto, actually teach our human cells good from bad. And our gut brain, which is Rabia's speciality, so I don't want to touch upon it while she's in the room. But our gut and brain are linked, and we're going to go on to that. But it does so much more than than what we think it does, essentially. And our gut microbiome now, it's quite a buzzword now. When we first started in the gut health, everyone was like, gut micro, what? And everyone's like, yeah, the microbiome, woohoo, yay. But the truth is that your microbes, if an alien came down from outer space, they would think that we are hybrid creatures, so part microbial and part human. And that is because these bacteria, viruses, fungi live in, around and on us, and the reason that we associate them with our gut health is because a lot of them live within our large intestine. It's moist, it's dark, it's damp in there, they love it. But they are absolutely crucial to our overall health. They do so many different jobs, including supporting our immune system. They actually produce vitamins. They help us ferment fibre, which we'll get onto. Fibre is the buzzword for tonight. We'll probably say it at least 75 times. We can do fibre bingo.
Yeah, we should do that one.
We should. They influence our sleep. They produce short-chain fatty acids, which again we'll get onto. And again, the word short-chain fatty acids is usually the glaze-over moment for a lot of people because it's on the sciencey side. But we'll explain that a bit later on as well. But in short, they are super important and we need a diverse mix of them.
And we wouldn't be alive without them. And I think when we first heard this, we were at the grand old age of 25, and I was like, how in my 25 years did I not know that I had these creatures in, around and on me? And it really blew my mind. I was like, give me a bath, wash me, can I drink some bleach? This feels weird. But actually, you know, they're so important to our health, and they are absolutely crucial for day-to-day life.
So unfortunately, we don't know what, everyone always says, what bacteria should I be having? And yes, science points to a lot of fantastic probiotic products. But we don't yet know in individuals what a good gut looks like and what a bad gut looks like. But a lot of the science is pointing in the direction of diversity. So having lots of different types of microbes. If you look at all the jobs that they do on the slide previously, you'll see that you need a lot of different types to do those jobs. So we like to think of it as a rainforest. This slide looks more like woods in Surrey. It could look more rainforesty, but essentially we are looking for lots of different types and an ecosystem. So there's too much of one, there's an imbalance there, and it's quite simple when you can get your head around like that. More diverse is better health outcomes.
The way I like to see it is if we just had a rainforest with just like one type of flower and toucans, it wouldn't be that thriving ecosystem. We need lots of different animals and plants in order for it to be, the most thriving community.
Toucans?
I don't know, I like a toucan. Okay, so when people hear this and they realise how important it is, the first question is, okay, how do I change it? How do I make it better? The good news is when we went through the clinical trials, we changed the makeup of our microbiome in 2 weeks. So that can be scary, but
ours was very, very bad.
Low. I think we were we were Scottish working class DJs. It couldn't have been worse.
It was a low bar.
Yeah. But we did manage to change them in 2 weeks, and I think that is so empowering, if a bit scary. But lots influences it. There's a few things that we can change and a few things that we can't. So the things that we can't change, unfortunately, which we'll not, cling on to, is how we were born, how we were fed as babies, where we're born in the world, where we are in the world. We can obviously change that a little bit now, but not historically. Diet is the main one we're going to talk about today, but it's not the only one, but it's the one that we have the most control over, I'd say, apart from exercise and stress. Drugs, cigarettes and alcohol. Age, unfortunately, we can't do anything about yet, but Brian Johnson might change that for us soon. Stress is another huge one that we'll play a part on.
I love how well-being talk as well. Everyone goes, so guys, the key is to just be less stressed, and everyone's like, yeah, all right.
So that's 101, give or take, which is quite complicated, but we're going to go through a few tips with you to show you just how you can do that. But we couldn't do a gut health talk without talking about
Sorry,
poo.
it is a nice pink slide, okay? But our stools are one of the most physical indicators that we have for our gut health, and hopefully they are a regular physical indicator. But we're looking, when we're talking about our stools, what's the frequency, how often are we doing them? I'm sure we'll get onto this more in the fireside chat, but what is the colour, what is the consistency? And there's a really fun chart called the Bristol Stool Chart, which is essentially a list of different poos
that we actually put on bus stops in lockdown.
I think that is what is going to. That's going to be our legacy.
Yeah.
That's going to be what we're known for. But essentially, what we're looking for is a 3 or 4 of this chart. We're not going to go into too much detail. On our app, which you're going to get codes for, you can scan through and have a look. And I think whilst we're on the subject of this, we do have to address red flags. So a lot of the information that we're going to be talking about today is for general gut health and general well-being, but as Rabia and Sophie can attest to, we really must kind of draw your attention to these red flags. So if you notice changes in your stool, of course blood in your stool, persistent pain or bloating, sand or yellow coloured stools, stools that don't flush, bad smelling stools, all of these things, it's really important that you go and see your GP. Please do not go on Dr. Google, see a healthcare professional. Okay, tips. We've only got 5 minutes, so we will whiz through these. So we need different types of bacteria. So different types of bacteria like different foods. So they have this magic number of 30 different plants a week. They haven't just sprung out of thin air. It was actually part of the study that we were from, and they took 10,000 stool samples, which is a lot of poo, and they deduced that people that had over 30 plants a week had more diversity in their gut. So ways and tips and top tips to get more plants into your diet, and by 30, different colours count as well. Lisa and I have all the hacks. So red pepper, yellow pepper, green pepper, yellow pepper, that's 4 points. Also
not just
mixed bags of salads. Mixed bags of nuts and seeds. Mixed bags of nuts and seeds. 30 is easy.
Yeah, so as many different fruits and vegetables, nuts, seeds, legumes, herbs and spices count, which is absolutely fantastic, because even if you're just having some porridge, could you pop some cinnamon on there? Those sort of different hacks are easy and fantastic. So as many different types.
Frozen food as well. The freezer is not your enemy, and it's great for batch cooking, which I'm sure we'll get onto as well. Right, okay, a little bit of fun and games. Also, that little whisk-stop tour has just gained you GCSE biology. Well done, congratulations.
Certainly more than we got.
Exactly that. Okay, recommended daily intake of fibre. I'm going to give you a little bit of a clue. A portion of broccoli is around 2.5 grams. So that's your benchmark.
An apple is about 2.5 grams. 30 grams is in the lead.
This is like
the Grand National.
hosting a game show. This is like a game show. This is so fun.
Yeah, right. 30 grams, bingo. Well done. Congratulations. 25.
Oh, Sunday vote 30 grams immediately and quit.
Right, there we go. Get off the slide.
Next.
Okay, what % of the UK population get 30 grams of fibre a day? I'm so glad this has worked.
You don't have a lot of faith in the UK population.
Yeah. And fair enough. Okay, yes.
You're correct.
9% it is. So 9 in 10 of us don't get enough fibre. So that's 90% of us in this room don't get enough fibre. And in fact, most of us are actually only getting about 15 grams. Fibre is so important. Here's fibre bingo coming. Fibre. We always just thought that fibre, our granddad Jim used to say after he had his all bran, it makes me go, and it absolutely does. It bulks your stool, but now we know that it feeds the bacteria. It feeds the good bacteria in our gut. So you have this double-pronged approach. It's super, super important. These are lots of different ways that the benefits of fibre, and people often ask us, what do you mean by fibre? Prune juice, cereal, but fibre actually is in lots of the things we eat. The beauty of fibre, I think, is that we're all eating it, we just aren't having enough of it. So our simple hacks for upping our fibre are make plants the star of the show. So what plants could you add? Keep the skins on fruit and veg. Roast potatoes are still as crunchy with the skins on, I can confirm. Choose whole fruit over juicing, and know your numbers when it comes to fibre. As we said, broccoli is only 2.5 grams of fibre, so we really need to work really hard at it. But start slow and work your way up. I'm just going to whiz through some simple swaps. So there's a high street porridge next to an overnight oats, a gut stuffed plant-based wrap like you had tonight next to a high street wrap. Big difference. The brownies you had tonight versus a high street brownie, double fibre. And then the big one for me is brown pasta and rice, and the difference you can just by swapping. I'm going to whiz past ferments because we can cover that in the fireside chat, and we can cover gut brain in the fireside chat, and we can cover box breathing in the fireside chat.
Rabia's box breathing is enough to put anyone in rest and digest mode. So
that voice.
We're going to leave that to her. We're not the most soothing of voices.
No, quite abrasive.
To conclude, I think when when we talk about gut health, everyone wants a magic pill, and unfortunately, there isn't one. And it's everything that we sort of know and our ancestors have told us. These simple building blocks will give you a great foundation for better gut health. So variety, fibre, mind, which we'll get onto. Hydration, you know, it's really simple. A lot of people say to us, I'm really constipated. Why do you think it is? How much water are you having? So hydration's really key. Moving, which I'm sure we'll get onto as well. Ferments, which you had a bit of sauerkraut tonight, so tick, everyone's got a couple of diversity points there. And probiotics as well to try our cherry on top. So if Alana and I can do it, anyone can. In a decade, we've changed our gut health in the studies to the bottom 5% of the population in the UK to the top 5%. And we have a lot more energy than we used to have, which is probably the biggest difference that we've seen. So I would like everyone to choose. We will hold you accountable every Friday forevermore.
Just choose one thing that you're going to do for the next 2 weeks. The beauty of gut health, it's so different from the way we've thought about health before. We used to think about health as something super restrictive before we went on holiday. We've done every diet going, cabbage soup diet, Dukan diet, juice cleanses, all that sort of nonsense. And actually the beauty of gut health is that it's about adding stuff in, not taking stuff out. Variety, amazing.
Winner.
And fibre, second. Amazing, cool. Fireside chat, enough from us. Only.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ever done that? I bet you
Speedy.
got a word of it.
Whistle stop talk
Yeah.
through all things gut health. Thank you so much, ladies. It was a really nice overview, I think, of where you've come from and what you, over the 8 years that you've been running the gut stuff, what you feel are the highlights of what everyone in this audience can take away as practical tips. Now, I'm going to bring Sophie in straight away. A lot of this is answering the pre-event questions that you sent in. And we're going to start with the idea of fibre and just doing a little bit more of a deep dive. So what we've learned so far about fibre is that it's the single macronutrient that you can increase in your diet through the tips that we've mentioned, leaving the skin on the vegetables, including mixed varieties of nuts and seeds as toppings to your salad, and so on. However, there are different types of fibre, right? And different types of fibre behave differently in the body. And what we also saw from the audience in this room is that bloating is sometimes one of the most common and most uncomfortable symptoms that you can struggle with, albeit it's a normal symptom to feel bloated if you eat lots of heavy food. And so it's a normal symptom, and yet it's incredibly uncomfortable, and it can become abnormal. So, Sophie, tell us a little bit about the different types of fibre. And for those in the audience who struggle with bloating or even wind, medical term flatulence, if you struggle with wind or excess bloating, how can you take care of the types of fibre on your plate to start to manage these symptoms a little bit better?
Great question. You might need to come back to me for the second part, but
Yeah.
I remember the first part. When we think about fibre, there's 2 types of fibre. We might even think about 3 types of fibre when we get into talking about symptoms. One of the things that's really important to remember is that for those of you who have healthy guts, even if you have some of these niggling symptoms like occasional constipation, occasional looser stools, some bloating, those sorts of things, then all of this advice is completely aimed at you. But there will be some people in the audience, and I know there is someone in the audience who lives with an inflammatory bowel condition or a medical problem related to their bowel. Perhaps you've had bowel surgery for a bowel cancer. All these sorts of things are unfortunately relatively common.
Yeah.
So when we talk about the sort of stuff that Lisa and Alana talk about, that's brilliant for those of you who don't have a gut condition. For those of you who do, we do need to be a little bit careful with fibre types, and some of this advice might make your symptoms a bit worse. Now, in general terms, there are 2 different types of fibre. There's soluble fibre, which is like the inside of an apple or melon, or the sort of fibre that comes from oats, the sort of fibre that creates a sort of mucousy type substance when it's wet. And that stuff draws lots of water to your bowel and helps to soften the stool. And then there's insoluble fibre, which adds bulk to the stool. And both are really important. And there is movement in my community to stop talking about the 2 different types of fibre. But actually, as a colorectal dietitian, someone who specialises, as my friends say, in butts and guts, someone who specialises in that, I know how important it is to differentiate those two types of fibre. Because if you have certain symptoms, making sure you're not having too much insoluble fibre, that stuff that bulks the stool, can make symptoms feel much, much more comfortable. And lots of you might have experienced, for example, having a really high fibre meal and feeling really heavy and maybe quite bloated afterwards. And that's relatively normal, and it's because on its way is a much bulkier stool than you might be used to passing. And that's great, and that's fine. But what we need to think about if you have these symptoms like bloating and gas or things that are uncomfortable is trying to look at something called fermentable carbohydrates in the diet. And they are actually carbohydrates that come from sugars. And they're in all sorts of different things, including fruits and vegetables, some things like wheat as well. They're really common foods that we consume really regularly. And the ones I'd like you to have a little eye out for in terms of your own diet, if you do have wind and bloating, or if you're having uncomfortable stool symptoms, are onion and garlic, which we know is in absolutely everything, so really tricky to avoid. Onion and garlic, wheat, things like mushrooms as well, the stalks of broccoli, not the heads of broccoli, apples and pears, some of these really common foods that we consume. And I'd encourage you to, if you are having some of these niggling symptoms that aren't big enough to think about maybe seeing somebody medical for, consider just taking those out of your diet for a few days and seeing how you feel. And if that helps to settle your symptoms, have a little bit more of a closer eye on how much of those you're consuming on the days that you do have symptoms. And sometimes people might find it beneficial to use an app like the Gut Stuff app, or to track your symptoms with a food diary, and then you can see where those symptoms are coming up for you and what might be triggering them.
So onion and garlic is like the staple of like most Indian, South Asian cooking.
Yeah.
So what we're saying is that onion and garlic in particular are real trigger foods if you struggle with bloating, because they contain fermentable carbohydrates, and what that does is that it increases the amount of gas volume within the bowel, and it can cause gas trapping in the bowel. And so what would you recommend? How long would you eliminate onion and garlic from the diet for, roughly? And can you recommend any substitutes that we could use in our cooking that would still add the flavour but would give us a chance to see if we can be bloat-free?
Yeah, I mean, it's really difficult. It's difficult for people from every culture. You know, I work with Italian people as well as South Asians and people from all over the world, and it is really difficult for people. The other thing to bear in mind is that lentils, legumes, dal, those sorts of things are also really high in these fermentable carbohydrates, so they can cause problems for people as well. With onion, what you can do is just use the green part of a spring onion at the end of cooking, which still gives you that oniony flavour, but actually isn't going to give you any of this bloating symptom. And with garlic, you can use sparingly garlic infused oil. So if you buy some garlic infused oil, that will still give you that garlicky flavour, and you can use it as a base of your curry, for example, but it won't give you the same sorts of symptoms. What I would hate to happen is for any of you to leave this room and think that you can't eat your cultural foods that are important to you, because when we talk about taking these things out, when you work with a dietitian, we talk about bringing them back in as well and seeing what your tolerance level is like. There are also some interesting supplements on the market now that help to break down these FODMAPs a little bit better and make them easier to digest. So there are lots of options, but what I would hate to happen is that people think, and people have been told this in the past, unfortunately, oh, you can never eat curry again, you can never eat dal again, and that's simply not the case. There are ways of making your gut bacteria happier and able to tolerate these things better, and tools we can use to get lots more of them back into your diet.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sophie. We can come back to that in the Q&A if there's any more questions. Lisa, building on what Sophie's just said, it's really common nowadays for people to find that the food that they eat just doesn't make them feel good in their body anymore. It might not just be their digestion, it could be their skin, it could be their mood. I know that this is the most popular question from the pre-event audience, and it was my favourite question, especially because I think if my father had asked a question, he would have asked this one as well. Okay, so here it is.
Where is he?
Why do you think that our generation seems to have more problems with food than perhaps our parents' generation? Or put another way, are food intolerances real, or are they just a fad?
That's a big old question to digest or dissect. I think the main one is that we have too many sources of information via Instagram and social media. And I do think that those sources of information aren't trusted necessarily. So healthcare professionals like Sophie and Rabia, unfortunately the voices of influencers that are unqualified tend to be louder. So there's that. It's also very sensationalised. The press like to say, have a bit of sauerkraut and it'll cure your depression, or everyone needs to have celery juice and they're going to live an extra 20 years. And unfortunately, science just isn't that sellable. It's like it's not as binary as that, especially not nutrition. It's one of the most complex areas of science, and people would like a binary answer, particularly our generation. We're like, it's right or it's wrong, it's good or it's bad, what foods are good, what foods are bad, and we just don't have the answers to that. I also think that, you know, food has almost become kind of quite tribal, so people identify themselves as vegans, or they only eat meat. Now that's the new trend of lots of meat. And eat meat and butter?
No.
Yes,
Butter,
people still only eat meat and butter.
Oh, wow.
It doesn't sound like any fun, but...
Carnivore diet.
Yeah, the carnivore diet. And I think that people, and I think that that's part of it, where you're talking about the kind of sensationalised thing. And food intolerance, which I would like Sophie to get on our soapbox about. But there's a lot of food intolerance tests that are on the market that are, of course, now that we know, nonsense, but vulnerable people that are having symptoms will send off a lock of their hair or a piece of their skin thinking they're going to get an answer back of their food from their food intolerance, and it's just not the case. Sophie, you can probably touch on a bit of the science, but with these tests, but it's appealing. You know, you're getting a really binary answer of foods that you can and can't have and you're intolerant to, but unfortunately it's just not legit.
Yeah, and one of the things we also are working on understanding is how our gut microbiome, so the bacteria that live in our colon that we've been talking about, how they make us potentially more or less tolerant to food. So when we starve off, what we know to be true is when you cut out dairy from your diet, for example, you start losing the populations of gut bacteria that digest dairy. And so when you try to introduce it again, your gut bacteria has a bit of a shock. You've not got enough of the ones that digest it. And so you make yourself essentially more intolerant to dairy. And this is going to become a huge problem with the wave in plant milks and every young person drinking oat milk instead of cow's milk, because they are going to be lactose intolerant or intolerant to dairy when they try to reintroduce it. That doesn't mean that we can't change that. So the beautiful thing about our gut bacteria, as Alana and Lisa have said, is that it's changeable. So when I'm working with patients who want to reintroduce things that perhaps they've cut out of their diet because an influencer told them to, or they heard it on a podcast, what I ask them to do is take some really good probiotics to start with, start seeding some good bacteria, and then really slowly reintroduce that food, tiny bits every week, gradually increasing, so they can start seeding more of the good bacteria that help to digest that food, and then lo and behold, rather than thinking you can go from drinking no milk to having a massive ice cream, you can actually tolerate it after a few weeks and things get a lot better. So there is hope. If you are someone who identifies as having food intolerances, there is hope for making them better for a lot of people a lot of the time. But, you know, the big message really is don't cut out anything unnecessarily from your diet unless it's under medical or dietitian guidance.
Yeah, and I think that's what you see, that a lot of people, when you have a symptom related to your gut, whether it's bloating, a bit of diarrhea or constipation, the first thought that comes to mind, what did I eat? Always, what did I eat yesterday or earlier today? And did that trigger these symptoms? And sometimes the most common thing is you get fear associated with eating that food and you start to cut out that food. And what we're trying to say is that rainforest of bacteria will change in its population and diversity and dynamic as a result of you cutting out that food group. And then you end up developing an intolerance or a true intolerance as a result. And unfortunately, some of the diets get narrower and narrower. But to just clarify on the question, there are a lot of people who do have a genuine lactose issue and a genuine gluten issue. So I'd love you to just clarify what is lactose, what is gluten, and the issues around that. Before we do, I just want to pick up on the idea that you can walk into any cafe on the high street and get a plant-based milk. You can go into anything from Starbucks to Nero to Pret, and you can have oat milk or almond milk or coconut milk. Why? Why is that? Is it because lots more people have developed a dairy intolerance? Maybe, and Sophie can pertain to that. But the other reason to remember about plant-based milks is it's part of an eco-friendly movement. So it's the idea that we're moving away from cattle-based milk because it's bad for the environment with CO2 production, and more people want to choose plant-based milks. Does that necessarily mean that they're healthier, or are there issues with these milks that we should be aware of?
Yeah, so if we start with lactose, we don't think there's any more people that are lactose intolerant than there used to be. Lactose is the sugar in milk. And you can actually be intolerant to both the protein in milk, particularly as a child, and also the sugar in milk, the lactose. And some people are genetically lactose intolerant, which means that they haven't continued into adulthood producing an enzyme that helps to break down lactose into its more digestible form. You can also acquire secondary lactose intolerance, which either happens because of your gut bacteria or because after gastroenteritis or food poisoning or something like that, you stop producing the enzyme that helps to break it down. Now, as I said before, my fear is that the rise in plant-based milks is going to make more people lactose intolerant, and eventually we're going to end up with a real osteoporosis crisis on our hands. It's not to say that if that's something that you've done, taking dairy out of your diet is something that you've done to work on the environment because of your faith or practices or whatever it might be, that's completely understandable and people should be supported in doing that. But it's not without consequence, both digestively and also from a bone health perspective. So we do need to think about that. There is two types of people who might be intolerant, in inverted commas, to gluten. And again, gluten, so true celiac disease, which is like a toxicity to gluten. When the gluten comes in contact, let me go back a step. Gluten is a very tiny protein that's found in wheat and rye and barley. And it's just this tiny thing that nobody should care about, but it's become this huge buzzword for people hating on it, and I feel sad for it. For some people, for a small percentage of the population, when it comes into contact with the bowel wall, it triggers the bowel wall to have an autoimmune reaction where it destroys the lining of the bowel. Now, the numbers of people diagnosed with and living with celiac disease hasn't increased at all. But as Rabia said about dairy, what you'll see now is that everywhere you go, there are gluten-free options. And in some ways, that's a brilliant thing for the celiac community, because when I started working in dietetics nearly 20 years ago now, gluten-free pasta was horrendous, gluten-free bread was horrendous, and now there are so many great options out there for people. You know, you can go to literally any cafe and get a gluten-free option. On the other hand, what's happened is that the trend for people to be gluten-free, which I think was sort of the first movement towards people going on like low-carb diets and demonizing carbohydrates, when that started to happen, what happens now, unfortunately, is that people don't take it very seriously, which is a problem for people who live with celiac disease. So I think the message is that there's, as far as we know from an evidence-based perspective, there's no more people who live with intolerances now to gluten and lactose specifically, but lots and lots of people are choosing to avoid them as part of a lifestyle, part of a trend, and sometimes it's transient and sometimes it sticks around for longer.
Thank you so much for clarifying that. And I think that's the situation is there's 1% is the prevalence of celiac disease, and that hasn't changed. But more and more people are finding that they're intolerant to gluten. And I just want to clarify one of the reasons that is a true phenomenon. And that's really because, to touch upon the point of stress and modern day stress. So the gut communicates with your brain via 4 main pathways: your hormones, your nervous system, your microbiome, and correct me if I'm wrong, but your, what did I say? Nervous system, microbiome, hormones, and your vagus nerve. And the communication is bidirectional, so the gut speaks to the brain and the brain speaks to the gut. What's interesting is the vagus nerve is made up of mixed fibers, and 70% of that communication is from your gut to your brain, 30% is from the brain to your gut. So more information is passing from the gut to the brain than the other way around. When it comes to gluten, what we've found and the studies have shown in the last decade is that a really common factor influencing the gut lining and the gut barrier is modern day stress and the food industry, which is producing more and more ultra-processed food. So in order to feed a growing population, we are taking shortcuts to produce bread and dairy, and in doing so, most of the bread that we eat is not as rich and fermented as it should be, and neither is the dairy. And so all of these factors are affecting the lining of the gut, and that small protein that Sophie's been talking about leaks through the gut wall and signals to the immune system that, hey, something is going wrong when it shouldn't. And that alerts the immune system to feed back to the bowel and cause an irritability or a sensitivity. And you may have heard the buzz term irritable bowel syndrome. It affects 20% of the UK population. So 1 in 5 people suffer from a sensitive or irritable gut, and gluten is really going to affect them. So when it comes to gluten and avoiding it, you can try gluten-free products, but unfortunately they contain a lot of sugar. The best thing is to try to find ways to build your plate that don't include those products. And I think, for example, tonight having sort of chicken salad and rice would be one example of them.
Yeah, and there are loads of good grains that are naturally gluten-free as well, that you can still make flatbreads with, that you can still incorporate into pastries and things like that. So there are plenty of ways to be gluten-free, and it's easier, as I said, than ever now. And it's really important not to just cut out all grains altogether, because whole grains are so important for a healthy gut.
Absolutely. So let's take the conversation away from food a little bit. I've mentioned the idea that stress can affect the gut. I'm going to just send this question to Alana. There's this connection between the brain and the gut that we've spoken about, where lots of the information goes bottom up, so to speak. In the 8 years that you've been running the gut stuff, what would you say was the single most important factor that you've come across that speaks to the connection between mental health and digestive health and vice versa?
I think for me it is around that your body doesn't know the difference between actual stress, so literally a saber-toothed tiger running for us, or coming to get us, and perceived stress, so a WhatsApp pinging up on your phone. Your body reacts in the exact same way. So with that fact, I was like, well, we all must be chronically stressed all the time, because we all have our phones within a metre of us at all times. So that for me was a huge eye-opener. And I think, you know, a lot of people that come to us at the gut stuff, if they do have an issue, a lot of them actually don't know about IBS being reclassified as a gut-brain connection. And as you rightly said, a lot of people will go, if they have a gut issue, oh, what did I eat? And actually, with it being reclassified as a gut-brain connection, it could be something to do with stress. So I think for me, just that light bulb moment of, wow, we must all be stressed most of the time. And what barriers and boundaries can we put in place? So, for example, just easy things like, you know, turning off the notifications that you don't see that email from your boss coming up straight away. Don't tell your boss. Or on your phone. How could you not be on your phone, an hour before bed? Those sort of little simple swaps will make a huge difference. But that, just finding out that I constantly have a saber-toothed tiger running after me was pretty scary.
It's me.
Yeah, exactly. I hear you. Always on my back.
So, Alana, what you're saying is that there are lots of micro stresses occurring in modern day living. Everything from a WhatsApp to making sure that we need to clear our email inbox to responding to being quite responsive all the time is a form of micro stress that's modern day living, that's affecting the way that we digest our food. It's affecting the way the gut barrier functions. Mm-hmm. And in turn is affecting and triggering symptoms in a way. And it's a vicious cycle because you may have heard the buzz idea of serotonin, your happy hormone. 80 to 90% of your happy hormone serotonin is made in the gut. And that's the 70% of communication that's going up, is that all of the gut microbes are producing these endohormones that are sending signals to the brain that are saying, we are in a stressful environment. Digestion is the first thing to shut down, because if you're running from a saber-toothed tiger, the last thing you need is your digestion.
Yeah,
and so that part of your nervous system says, we don't need that anymore, we can shut it down. And in that situation, chronic microstress leads to chronic digestive ill health.
Yeah, and just learning that the opposite of fight or flight, which we're all in all the time, is rest and digest. Yeah. Like they literally are two opposing ends, which is, was a mind-blowing emoji for me.
We're coming to the end of the fireside chat, but for the final question, I'm actually going to turn back to Sophie. And I just want to share a little bit about a practice in our Ismaili community, which occurs certainly for 1 month annually, but also on some Fridays on the new moon, and that is fasting. So many of us engage in the practice of fasting, and during that time it can be common to have a really heavy meal in the early hours of the morning, or indeed need to eat in those dark hours and sometimes snack. Do you have any thoughts on the impact of fasting on our gut health? And do you have any tips for those of us in the audience who practice fasting around the timing of when we eat. We've talked a lot about what we eat. We haven't talked about when you eat. What's the importance of the timing of eating, and any tips on what to have that would really nourish us for that early morning 4 a.m. heavy meal before the sun comes up?
Well, I'm a newly converted Muslim. My husband is Somali. So I've been joining him in fasting for about 3 years now. So I'm familiar with Ramadan and the challenges of Ramadan. One of the things that's really nice, and maybe quite validating in a way, but perhaps a little frustrating, is that the sort of modern day trends have now really caught on to fasting, and you guys are like, yeah, we've been doing it for ages, but everyone else is going, oh, this is great. And it is great for us. It is great for us. There's loads of interesting studies showing that there are real benefits to intermittent fasting, we would call it, where perhaps you eat in a shorter time window. Our gut bacteria have a circadian rhythm, a body clock of their own. So we know that if we're eating constantly, we're not giving them time to settle into their own rhythm and to be as happy and healthy as they could be. One thing that so fasting is great for our gut health. The rest of the world knows that now, and you guys have hopefully probably known that for a lot longer than anyone else. One of the things to think about in terms of the morning meal and your evening meals is to think about trying to make sure you're hydrating, focus on protein and fibre first, and that's going to really help you to keep fuller through the morning. So that first meal that you have, two of the main important things that help with satiety, so staying fuller for longer, are protein and fibre. And if you're well hydrated, that fibre is going to take even longer to move through the digestive system and give you better nourishment through the morning and better release of water so that you're feeling less thirsty through the morning as well. And so there's lots of things that you could think about around that, but it's kind of thinking about perhaps wholemeal chapatis and maybe a nice dal curry, things that are sort of easy to digest but also are going to give you that fibre and that protein that you need. Yogurt, fruits, these kinds of things can be really helpful for that first meal. When you break your fast, what's important there as well is hydration. And at home, we love to break our fast with like a really nice chicken broth or a broth that's got lots of different nutrients in it that we can help to get rehydrated, but also get lots of nutrients that we're perhaps missing from before. And in my husband's community, it's very common to break with samosas and very high-fat foods and things like that. I think that would be really heavy on my digestion. I think I would struggle with that. But, I'm new, so I can't speak for everyone else. If I was used to it from childhood, maybe it would be different. I think it's about finding things that work for you and your family, and there is obviously opportunity to have some of those celebratory and those treat foods, but perhaps trying to make sure that you're still focusing on getting the nutrients that you need. It can feel really difficult to get at least 5 portions of fruit and veg in a day through Ramadan, but I would throw that as a challenge to people to see whether you can still achieve that through the fasting period, because that's going to really help with hydration. It's going to help with those nutrients and make sure that you stay as well as you can do through that period.
Thank you so much, Sophie. So that brings us to the close of our fireside chat. And I would like to also thank IVC. IVC are the backbone of this Jamaat. Without them and the volunteers' support, we would not be able to run events, particularly that end at 11 p.m. So thank you. Hospitality for getting out those wraps entirely on time, and for the salad, and for working so hard. Arif, thank you so much to Hospitality. And the AV team, thank you so much for always being so responsive and for coming to our aid with mics that make us feel even more important. Aga Khan Health Board, Sarah, Panjwani and Mira, thank you so much. You are the pioneers of feminine leadership. Thank you for always allowing me to run with the crazy ideas that I have, and thank you for bringing the mental, physical health debate into the spotlight. I could not do this without the Wellbeing and Lifestyle Committee, and in particular, Iram and Naima, who are standing to my left. Thank you so much. I do not know how this event would ever have gotten out the ground without the two of you. Thank you for your efficiency, for your passion, and for your dedication. Thank you so much. And lastly, to, of course, Lisa and Alana, Lisa for being pregnant and for being here with baby and all. Thank you so much to all three of you, Sophie as well, for just having your voice project again and again on the topics that really matter, and just blessings for your future work. I hope you continue to do good work in the world and that people continue to draw to you for all things gut health related. And thank you, and Yali Madid.